Hi, my name's Mary Pat Jacobs, and welcome to Beyond the Echo Chamber podcast. Why are we here? I live in an echo chamber. We all do to some extent. The echo chamber I'm referring to contains women who are frankly tired, frustrated, and angry about the inequality we experience on a regular basis. Participating in this little bubble, this little female echo chamber, it's validating, it's cathartic, but for me, this only made me more angry with men and more resentful with my husband. And last time I checked, resentment doesn't lead to meaningful change. Like Liz Plank says, we can't improve women's lives if we don't help men. So what I'm doing here is inviting men into conversation about gender equality and masculinity so that you can feel empowered to do the same. In whatever spaces it makes sense to have these conversations. It could be your workplace, it could be your church, your family, your home, your broader community. Having these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, is important. So come with me as we go beyond the echo chamber, one conversation at a time. Having a baby is an experience like no other. It requires the most emotional, mental, and physical strength one can muster. And in this episode, I talk with Rob, who's a Chicago native, who's husband to Jess, my coworker and work wife, although we're not really using labels here. Rob is a new father to Millie, who's 6 months old, and she is just adorable. Absolutely adorable as all get out. He gets on his soapbox in this episode about childcare and parental leave, and let me just tell you, it is so refreshing to hear a man talk as passionately about these topics as women. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, Rob, to another episode of Beyond the Echo Chamber. It's great to have you here today. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but first I actually probably should say how we know one another. I work with your lovely wife, Jess. She is fantastic, and I am so grateful that you have offered to come on to the podcast. You are my first video guest. You are also the first non-family member. So this is really me going beyond, to really, even, truly, like the name of the podcast, going beyond the echo chamber, here to talk to someone who I know a little bit, but now I'm getting to know you a little bit more by having this conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for having me. I am totally fanboying out right now. One, just listening to the first 8 episodes. Jess and I were working at the same kitchen table for like 9 months, which was, the pandemic was miserable for so many reasons, but that was like, I loved that part of it, which is weird to say, but like I got to like experience her work, and you are such a big part of that and have been such a big part of that. And so I would always try to eat whenever I knew it was like a Mary Pat status or like a HR status, like I would always try to like eavesdrop just to see what you guys are going to talk about, because it's always like, shout out to the HR teams, because you guys deal with so much stuff. Yeah, that it's like, I don't know, go thank your HR business partner or team, because they do way more than I think people give you guys credit for. But no, I am incredibly happy to be here and to talk with you. I'm excited.
Awesome. Good. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I so appreciate that. And definitely, I just want everyone who's listening to know, like, I did not tell you to shout out HR teams.
No.
That's just you genuinely recognizing the work that HR teams do. It's not unlike being a mom or like the invisible labor that we take on. It's all in the same, there's probably like a strong Venn diagram there.
Oh, it's basically a circle.
So tell me a little bit about you, Rob.
Yeah. So I live with my wife, Jess, our daughter, Millie, who is 6.5 months old, which is funny because like you can't even really remember a time like before she was here. You know, that's kind of, that's just like what we do now. You know, we're just parents to a little baby. But no, so we live in the Chicago suburbs, same spot actually where I went to high school. But yeah, no, we're just honestly just doing like the new parent thing. Like that is most of what we're most, if not all of what we're doing.
So tell me a little bit, Rob, what do you do for work?
So I work in marketing. I work in specifically pet food marketing. So I actually, the reason we were in St. Louis, my wife and I, so I should say we were originally both from the Chicago area. We went to St. Louis when I was attending grad school at WashU in St. Louis. I had a really wonderful experience and I joined Nestle Purina coming right out of business school. So I spent some time there kind of in the middle of the pandemic. Jess and I were able to sort of make the big move back home to Chicago, and I was able to continue to work in the space. So it's been great. Not absolutely not where I thought I was going to be. It was just kind of one of those things where, it's just the way events sort of lined up. Actually, before I went to business school, I used to be an elementary school teacher, so it was just the total left turn from what I used to be doing.
Definitely.
But I love it. It's a great time.
That's great. Isn't it funny
Yeah.
how like you set out thinking you're going to do something and then you change it along the way.
Life happens, man.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, you have a 6.5-month-old daughter. Let's talk about what the experience was like. This is kind of a grand question, a broad question of what it was like becoming a father.
Oh gosh, it's everything that people tell you it's going to be, and it's also nothing like anything that people tell you it's going to be. It's so I mean it just it changes everything, like just by virtue of like bringing another human into the world. And like you can sort of get there in an intellectually, like we knew what we were doing when we were like, okay, well we want to like grow our family, we want to have a baby. Like we were like understanding of like what that meant on paper, right? But then when it actually happens, it's the most like amazing and difficult, but like you can't wait to get up and do it again feeling that. It's really hard to describe. I mean, we're very lucky that we're both able to work from home. So that dynamic has been helpful, that we've been able to be here. Jess had, I think it's never long enough, but like relative to other companies' maternity leaves, like she had a very, good lengthy maternity leave. Obviously, I wish it could be longer, like it should be longer, but relative to the average, like at least she was able to spend a good amount of time at home. So all things considered, like we were very fortunate and as much as you can kind of ease into it, but there's really no easing into it. Like you're just jumping right into the deep end. But no, it's been wonderful. I mean, she's entering that age now where like she's having fun, like we're getting to the point where like her personality is coming out, and it's been great. I mean, it's like every single day is something new and something exciting. The sleep is getting better, which is phenomenal. Like she's sleeping more, which is really, which is like really all you can ever ask for. Like when you're in like that like haze of the first like 8 weeks, you're like, this is just my life now of only sleeping in, half hour to 60-minute increments. But we're finally past that. Knock on wood. But no, she's doing really well. She's, happy and healthy and smiling and giggling and, doing all the fun stuff. But it's been great. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. And like, it was one of those things where like I just transitioned really quickly into like being a mom. Like she did it. It was just like, it just happened. And like, it was really, really cool. Like it almost like happened in the hospital. Like, it's just like a thing that just like, I don't know if it's like the nature or nurture of it, but like it
primal,
just happened.
Yeah.
Right. It just happened. And like for me, not that I didn't like, I loved being her dad right away, but I didn't know how to be a dad. Like it took some time and it took some learning, and it's like figuring out like this is the hungry cry versus this is I'm a gas, like I've got gas cry. Like all of that stuff, like Jess just knew. Like I don't know how, but she just did. And so for me, there was like this kind of learning process and trying to understand her cues and what does everything mean that I just didn't know. You just don't know until you're in it. But I was very like, I am very fortunate that like Jess was so supportive of me trying to learn, and like not just the way in which she like gave me kind of space to like figure things out was really important.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of an odd question. So you bring that up of she gave you space. I know that there can be this dynamic especially when the first baby is born, that the mom's just sort of like, you're messing this up. You don't know how to do this. Just let me do this. And then I think what that ends up doing, and we talk about division of labor on the podcast, like it ends up creating more and more of a divide where then that partner that wasn't the, I'm going to use the appropriate terms here, birthing parent
Hmm.
is who's there like supporting and caregiving as best as they can just starts to do that less or feel like they can't fully participate in the process or support the process in a way that's actually helpful. So it's like just it starts to get more of a division. So it's great to hear that you both have figured out like what that dance is like, but I'm curious, and this is kind of an odd question, Rob.
Yeah.
What was it that made you feel like I'm not going to take a back seat and just let Jess do this because she seems like such a natural like you it sounds like you were curious and willing and motivated to help. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the so the process of childbirth and labor is about as unfair and unequal as it gets in a relationship, right? Like I can't even imagine like a more extreme version of like the responsibility of the birthing parent relative to the non-birthing parent. Like it's I can't it's you can't quantify it. Like it's even hard to like articulate just how uneven that balance is. And this was, my first time obviously experiencing kind of this side of the healthcare system, and this idea that I spent I without getting too in the weeds, like when I was in college I had this sort of cardiac issue and I spent 10 days in the hospital, and that like that was it was a really difficult, like kind of brutal experience of spending that amount of time in the hospital, but it doesn't even hold like a candle to what Jess went through. And like I felt like I was out of commission for like the next year, just by like being,
Sure.
and so watching what Jess had to go through and just how unequal it was, I'm like, well, I have to do something. Like I can't, like this can't all possibly fall to in the my wife Jess. Like that's just there's just no, it just was never really an option for me to say that, like, okay, well, not only did you
Mm,
give birth, not only are you recovering, but you're not only are keeping our baby alive is like your body is producing the thing that's keeping our baby alive right now.
right.
Like like the least I could do is figure out how to soothe our daughter when she's gassy. Like that just seems like the lowest thing that I could possibly do here. And so I was like motivated to try to figure it out. Like it wasn't easy. I mean, I you know, Millie, my daughter, like we went through this kind of like 2 or 3 week period where like I really struggled to like do the right thing to soothe her. Like it just didn't happen right away. And again, like Jess was able to just do it. But there were times where like I wanted Jess to go take a nap because she hadn't slept in like 3 days. And so I would just do whatever I could to like I would like march around. So this one night I can't remember this. She might have been like 2 weeks old at this point, and Jess was just trying to sleep, and she had just ate, so I knew we didn't think she was hungry, but she was just crying and she wouldn't stop. And so the only thing that would soothe her was like me holding her, but like marching, like in like a very like up and down. And so I marched around our kitchen island from like 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
I was just like dripping with sweat, but she was like relaxed and like I felt accomplished. And I'm just thinking like the whole time, like it's literally the least I could do is to try to give, Jess 2 hours to sleep. And I'm just like, and I'm getting my workout in.
Yeah, you're getting
Um,
your steps in for sure.
exactly.
Your
So,
marches in.
so right, exactly. And so it was just like the, I really do think, and I had like very, very good male role models growing up, just like my dad, grandfathers on both sides. But the dynamic in those marriages was in each of those cases was the woman stayed home and the man went to work. And so like the division of labor as it related to childcare was just, it just fell on like my mom or both my grandmas, which is not to say they weren't involved. My dad was incredibly involved, but it's just there's just so many hours in the day, right? Like that's just how it
Sure.
works. And so because Jess was had every intention on going back to work, I just sort of knew like we're gonna have to figure something out. Like it cannot possibly just all fall on her. And so you just kind of figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. Was it something that you discussed before you had Millie, or was it something that like once you were in it and you were seeing it all play out, how did that work?
Yeah, it was probably a little bit of both. I think we definitely, it is funny though how the conversation changes. So like before we had Millie, like there was never even there was never a question whether or not Jess was going to go back to work. Like she was going to go back. Like she's worked extremely hard for her career. Like I would have felt awful if having a kid meant her leaving the workforce. And then you have your baby and you realize how difficult it is to find childcare. And thank God
Yes.
we came and we were able to figure it out. And Jess is back at work. But there was like we started to just broach the subject of like, well, what happens if you don't go back? Right. And there's
Yeah.
not because it didn't want her to, it's just because like you almost feel like you don't have options. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really difficult. But no, I think it was a little bit of both in terms of like, you know, Jess is really good about sort of setting boundaries in terms of like what she's willing to do, how far she's willing to go, and like where I can come in and be a support. And so I think we've, part of our relationship, I think, where I give a lot of credit to sort of where we are today was because when we were in St. Louis, we were by ourselves, like our family and friends, like we didn't it was just us. It was us and our at the time our dog Maisie, and we really just it's so cliche, but like we really were like each other's like best friends at the time, even before we got married. And so I think it's it's also just figuring out what the right dynamic is to that that's going to enable each of us to succeed in whatever we're doing. And I think that we do a really, I'm not trying to blow so much smoke up our own rear ends, but I do think we do a really good job of like figuring out like what do we need to do in order to be the right type of support for the other in whatever this either goal or activity, or in the case of parenting, like what do I need to do to give Jess a break? What does she need to do to give me a break? I mean, even now it's like, some like we'll trade off like who puts her to bed each night. And like there's times when I just can't do it and Jess will come up and she'll say, let me take it from here, or vice versa, I'll come up. And so we really do try to read each other's signals and do the best we can to just be a support, knowing that like, to use your phrase, like the rising tide kind of lifts all boats there. Like if we're doing this right, like hopefully that'll help sort of de-stress the situation.
I feel like the dynamics that you've talked about in terms of the shared responsibilities, that division of labor, I actually feel like that's not as common. So if you want to blow smoke, if you want to celebrate that, like I think that's great. I think that's what you're describing is sort of the ideal circumstance, because what I hear you saying is like there's communication between the two of you. There's, you said, like reading signals, so paying attention to like having that awareness and setting boundaries, like Jess setting boundaries. I remember a conversation Jess and I had before she had Millie where I probably went overboard and like giving her advice or like saying
Yeah.
what to expect and everything. But we were talking about that, how that shakes things up. You think things are totally fine and like, yeah, it's very equitable in your relationship, and then you have a kid and you're like, whoa, like, because one partner is naturally having to do more, like especially if you're trying to breastfeed or pump or
Right.
whatever, it's just more. And then that partner's also recovering from birth, no matter what you're
Eh,
doing for your feeding. And so
Well,
like
yeah.
I remember being kind of thrust into that and thinking, wow, we're good. And then I'm like, oh gosh, we probably need to revisit some things that I think were assumed or maybe just don't work right now. Like I used to
Mhm.
cook, which I think about that now, and that is crazy because I can make a grilled cheese, I can make some eggs, but Josh is good at cooking and he loves it. So like it ended up, he started to take on that role, which made so much sense. But it's like we had to have those conversations, and sometimes shit kind of hits the fan, and then you're like, reaches that kind of fever pitch moment, and then you have the conversation, and you have to be open to changing. I think that's the other thing, is some people don't want to change and they're very comfortable,
Mhm.
and that's not great either.
No, I mean, and especially like when you're 100% right. And I think like, especially when you have a kid, like if you never plan on like being a flexible person, like then maybe you shouldn't be having kids, because like it's everything is upended. Like our schedule is her nap schedule. Like we can't just
Yep.
like I you know, like and that's one of those things too where I was probably a little hard on some of my friends who had kids before us, because like we'd want to hang out, we'd want to go golfing, we want to do this and that, and they just couldn't, or they had to be really kind of pick and choose when they would hang out. And it's like I like wish I could go like shake myself, because it was so like not understanding of just how much your life changes when you have a baby. Like you have to be you don't have an option. Like you have to do it. You know, you're going to get ready to like leave to like go somewhere, and your baby's going to have a blowout. Like you're going to be 10 minutes late because your baby, like it's
Always.
just going to happen. Always. It's the blowouts only happen when you're on your way out the door.
Exactly.
So like you just got to plan for this stuff. But no, it's true. And kind of like along those similar lines, like I'm honestly embarrassed at the amount of, when I thought it was a sign of like I was really dedicated and working hard by scheduling 8:30 or 8 a.m. meetings. And like people with kids, I just like, I'm so angry at myself for doing stuff like that without like thinking or having any sense of what it's like to, be dealing with your kid in the morning, just trying to either get them out the door if they're old enough that they're going to school, or if you have a baby, like coordinating childcare, all that kind of stuff. Like I think that like it's such it just changes the way you see the world in every way. And so if any one of those people who I scheduled an 8 a.m. meeting is listening, I am so sorry. I genuinely feel terrible about it.
Okay, so you talked about childcare a little bit before. So, and I wanted to reference, there was a Forbes article that I found that has lots of statistics about it. So
Yep.
hopefully I can read the printing off of my really mediocre printer. Okay. So from this Forbes article that was talking about childcare, it said, according to the research, 52% of mothers are considering leaving the workforce due to inadequate childcare, with 33% unable to find affordable care already out of work. In 2023, the percentage of stay-at-home mothers rose to 25%, a significant increase from 15% in 2022. So I remember during COVID, there was a like mass exodus of women from the workforce that I think they called it the she session. And I think the
Not really
numbers
what they
have
called
changed.
it.
Yeah, like a recession. Just massive amounts of mothers, because
Yeah.
we were in this moment of like, if you have kids and they're young kids, and even if they're not, they were kids that had to do online school. There were just so many things to manage. So how could you do that and have calls all day or be working while your kids are running it? And we did. We experienced that too. But I think for so many people, it got to a point where like, that just wasn't going to work. And I feel like when those dynamics happen, it's the woman that ends up leaving instead of the man, if you're in that kind of a relationship. So I know that there's a media company called The Skim. Not sure if you're familiar with them, Rob, but the two owners, the founders, they have talked about the childcare crisis, and they do a lot of communication about it. So I feel like I've learned so much, and I love that they're getting a platform for it, like that they're getting the word out. First, it started with companies, they called it Show Us Your Leave, and it was companies talking about their parental leave policies, and now it's like companies talking about what they're doing for childcare. So really long way of opening all of that up here. But you talked about childcare and like having those conversations with Jess about like how is this going to work? Like, is it going to work? Talk to me about how you started to identify what your childcare plans were going to be. Did it happen before you had Millie? Was it happening? Like, just help me understand how that all played out for you guys.
Yeah. So we knew, at least initially, we were going to explore both what the nanny options were, having kind of in-home help, and then what the daycare options were. After Millie was born, we really, to be totally frank, like we just were trying to like just survive the next day. That the actual childcare conversations, I don't think we started having in earnest until maybe 8 or 10 weeks after she was born, because then, at that point, Jess could kind of start to see, work was, she was going to be returning to work relatively soon. And so then it just became, what route do we want to take? Do we want to, try the daycare thing, or do we want to have a nanny? We saw a few daycares, and oh my, like, they were very, very nice. I was just not in a place, like, me personally, I could not imagine sending her Millie at, this young, tiny age to an all day. Like, I could not stomach it. I'd still like tear up thinking about it. I just couldn't do it. And on top of it, just the expense of it was, I mean, it was going to be more expensive than I went to the University of Illinois. Like, it was going to be more expensive than my college education. Like, it was wild how much it was. So after we sort of decided that we were going to go the nanny route, or having in-home help or in-home care for Millie, we were sort of introduced to this whole ecosystem of like how to find a nanny. And there's like all these Facebook groups, there's these apps. Like, it was, again, a whole new world that we had absolutely no idea existed. And at this time, I was already back at work, and Jess was still on her maternity leave. So Jess did most of the like the tactical, like actually doing the research for it, and trying to see what the options were, calling the prospective nannies, interviewing them before we had like an in-home interview. So she took on, frankly, the majority of that work in the 30 to 45 minutes that Millie went down for a nap. Like, it was okay, time to find a nanny. And we're even in like a very fortunate position where both of my mom, Jess's mom, can come over once or twice a week. And so we were really just looking for a nanny for a few days a week. But that whole process is, it's just, again, like, I don't know, I don't have like good words other than it's just unfair. Like, it's just unfair. There's the childcare system in this country is just abysmal. And again, you don't experience it, and you don't really think about it until you have a kid, and then you realize just how few options are out there. And from like, I can only sort of speak to the corporate experience, but big companies can do better in terms of their maternity leave. Just full stop. Like, it doesn't really take that much creativity to figure it out. What really like annoys me is, when the baby's coming, right? Like, if you tell your company at the 5 or 6 month mark, whenever it is you feel comfortable telling your company that you're pregnant, your manager, like, if you have 60, 90, 100 days to plan, like, you can figure out where the work needs to go. It's just not that difficult. It just isn't. Here are the things that I do every single day. Here are the things that I do to kind of keep the business running, or the things that the team needs. Here are the 3 to 4 big keystone projects. You figure out which ones of those that the company wants to keep afloat, and then they spread the work out. Like, it's just is not that difficult. And again, I'm speaking for kind of like big corporations. I understand, like, in different settings, like it is different, and service industry or really small company. I get, like, there's some differences. Big companies, though, there's absolutely no reason that new moms or birthing parents can't get a full year. Just full stop. Like, it does not take that much creativity to figure it out. And if we've learned anything in the pandemic, like, there's a lot of slack in these companies. Like, you can figure out where to put the work. And so, like, small, and I would quantify that as small, like, small changes like that would just make such a huge difference, especially because, like we were talking about earlier, the first 8 weeks of being at home, like, you're recovering, like without sleeping. So it's like you're trying to like heal your body, and you're keeping this new human that you just produced alive, and you're healing, And so the first 8 weeks of, your 12-week maternity leave, like, it's silly to even, like, that's not you're healing at that point. Like, you're not, it's not a big, that maybe is honestly the biggest thing. I'm going on my soapbox now, is like, you think of maternity leave as like a vacation. It's not a vacation. You just had this like traumatic physical experience that, yes, you got a wonderful, baby that, takes your entire heart, but you're physically, like, it's so physically demanding. And this idea that like 12 weeks or 16 weeks or 20 weeks, 20, whatever, pick a number less than 52 is enough. It just isn't enough. It just full stop isn't. And I don't know what the numbers look like, but I have to imagine that we can keep more more, birthing parents, more women in the workforce if we just do that one simple thing. And that's just better for everybody. Like it just is. And again, working at a larger company and seeing how many, kind of going through these different rotations of women who are on maternity leave, like it happens all the time. I just don't understand like what is so difficult about it where companies just think that the math says that it's better to only give a short amount of time. Like it's just not.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, that's my soapbox on
I love it.
maternity leave.
I'm on that soapbox with you, Rob.
Well, right, but then like as it relates to childcare, you have such a truncated amount of time to figure out your childcare, which is I think kind of landing this ridiculous plane I'm on, that because you have such a small amount of time, I could totally understand why a lot of women are just like, well, I'll just stay home, because you only have like 3 or 4 weeks where you're lucid enough to even figure out, what the childcare is going to look like. And it's really, really hard. And if you're not lucky enough to either find a nanny or have a good daycare that you can reasonably afford, what are you supposed to do? You're just kind of stuck. And I think it's just upsetting, and it's so like a total lack of like creativity and investment and just a willingness to kind of sacrifice a little bit of short-term pain for a long-term gain. It just seems so unnecessary after experiencing it.
Yeah, it's unnecessary. It's also not, I don't want to say it's inhumane, but it's not human. Like in this country, we do not have policies that support our families. And so just to take the FMLA, which is what that means in a nutshell, is having 12 weeks of job protected leave, and that is from the federal government. Does not mean that you're paid. The only reason that it is 12 weeks, and I didn't know this until I had my first child and I started to do research. So it wasn't just like I had a kid and then I just opened up a box of like knowledge about leave policies. Right. It was because I was pissed and I wanted to do research. 12 weeks is arbitrary. It has absolutely nothing to do with how much time is appropriate for a person's body to heal and recover, and the time that's appropriate to bond with this newborn child. It was a number that was negotiated in Congress, I think, in the 80s. I think the original recommendation, I'll have to go back and like find the actual numbers. I can't remember any data. That's why I have to like print stuff out in front of me. Right. But it was more up in the like 30 to 40 weeks was originally proposed by, I think it was a female senator. And then it had to be negotiated down. So it was like, let's negotiate to 12 weeks feels fine. Because when you talk about big corporations, they have a little bit more wiggle room to support those kinds of leave policies. When it's smaller corporations, small businesses, that's where you start to hear the math just ain't mathin'. We can't offer that. But to me, it's like, yes, it's a math thing. It's also a values thing. So you want your people performing. You're not actually thinking, and that's like what's most important, is that each of your employees is performing. But you're not thinking about, well, what do they require to perform? I have to believe the longer you give someone to recover, to establish that connection with their child, to figure out appropriate childcare options, the better employee you're going to have. They're not going to be bringing as much of that stuff to work with them because they would have had more time to, not that you like show up after you're done with your leave and you're like, even if it was a year, and be like,
right. I'm ready.
Good. We got to figure it out. Everything's perfect at home. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's like you get a call from daycare. Your kid just threw up.
Right.
Okay, there we go. But it is such I'm on the soapbox with you. Maybe we can start to get to some of the conclusion questions here. So we'll get really reflective here, Rob. What has surprised you most about becoming a father?
I think I am surprised that I'm not super neurotic all the time. I think while Jess was pregnant, I was so nervous about bringing someone into the world. Like, I think the world's a really scary place, and who knows what the next 100 years look like. And there's all these reasons that I would like had like this just general anxiety around like bringing a kid into the world. And then I'm still like nervous all the time, but it's so much more. She's just the focus. Like I don't like, I'm not as like plugged into the news as I was before, she came. And like I think there's a much like healthier balance of like the media diet just by virtue of you don't have time for any of that.
Totally.
But no, I think to me like I I knew, you fall in love with your kid immediately, like the second you see him, like that to me like wasn't surprising. I think kind of like the lack of neuroticism, where I genuinely was like nervous that I was going to be like just a ball of nervous energy all the time, which you don't want to do around a new baby because they pick up on that kind of stuff. I think was probably the most surprising thing. I think the other thing that really caught me off guard was, so I heard from like a lot of people that like, you're gonna come home from the hospital with the baby and you're just gonna have this moment that just washes over you and you realize like, oh my gosh, like everything is different. And I think it is, I didn't have that. And the reason I didn't was, I should say, I think the reason I didn't was, and I talked to Jess about this. She was okay with me sharing some of her labor story, but Jess had like a very, relative to the average labor experience, Jess had a really, really difficult pre-labor experience that was extremely painful. It was really, really difficult, and it was about like 2.5 days. And so we were in and out of the hospital for 3 days before she delivered Millie. And so by the time like I would have had like that moment at home, like we were just so happy to not be in the hospital anymore and just to just get home, that like that never really hit me. Like sometimes it hits me in like little moments during the day, like this morning, like I could not get this booger out. Like I was trying for like 10 minutes to just get this one boogie. It was driving me nuts. And she kept sucking it back in and I'm trying to get it out. Like those are the moments where I'm like, this is my life now. And I love it. I love every second of it. But those are also the moments where it kind of hits you, where it's like, I'm a dad. Like I'm responsible for this child. I'm responsible for modeling like what a good relationship looks like. Or Jess and I are responsible for modeling that, and like to create a home that she feels supported in. And those are the moments I think that it actually hits me most, is like changing the poopy diapers, getting the boogies out, or like she's got a lot of drool right now, so it's just like all my like sweatshirts just have like a dark gray spot on my left shoulder because that's where the drool goes. So
Yes.
so like those are the moments that it kind of hits me. But that's probably the most surprising thing, I think. It's like those little things that like you realize, oh, this is it.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Maybe you've kind of already answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. What's been the most rewarding part of being a father to Millie?
I mean, it all is like, it's just so much. It's so much fun, and I think seeing myself and seeing Jess's personality in her, like that's just really cool, and for me, like, I mean, you can ask my mom, if I was crying at any point growing up, it's because I was hungry, like, and that's Millie, like she only cries when she's hungry. And so like starting to kind of like see myself in her a little bit, Jess like seeing herself, and me seeing parts of Jess in her, just like in, she does like she'll make these like little like coy smiles, and it's like it looks like it's just doing it.
Aw.
And so like that I think is like a really cool part about this phase. So she's 6.5 months old. That's a really cool part about this phase, is starting to kind of see yourself in your child. But like as far as like rewarding, like it's funny because you feel like you're just constantly asking yourself, like, am I doing this right? Like,
Oh yeah.
like, what am I
That
doing?
never ends. That question
Right.
never ends.
Right. And and Jess and I both, like, we read like some of the books or whatever, and
Sure.
all that stuff, and listen to the podcast, but none of that stuff like really sticks until you're like in it and you're just trying to figure it out. But
Ah,
I think like the times, like there are times where, and like Jess and I talk about this, like where like we actually can confidently say like we handled this situation well, like where we'll give ourselves a pat on the back. And it's like small things too. It's like, we were gonna go somewhere and we thought to like change her diaper before we left. Like shout out us, like we did it. Like we're gonna make it through this car ride and she's not
Yes,
gonna have a clean diaper. Like small stuff like that.
absolutely. I feel like you should celebrate those small wins because it means that you're learning of what didn't work and you're
Right.
changing, and that can feel, yeah, just like, wow, I think I'm kind of figuring this thing out. But
Right.
I feel like with being a parent, it's there wouldn't be thousands of books and podcasts and webinars and all the things if we knew how
What we were
to do
doing.
it. Like it's
Yeah.
such a process, and I definitely have the same question both Josh and I do, are like, are we screwing them up? Are we doing enough? And I've learned through self-reflection, going to therapy, talking to lots of other people. I have older sisters and siblings who have kids. Like my parents, like the resounding chorus of things that they say back to that is, yes, you are doing enough because you are showing up for them, you're present for them, you're caring for them, you're providing a safe environment for them to grow up in, you're loving them. Like it's okay if you don't have like the latest little gadget, or like my kids, I just kind of gave up on them dressing in like cute little matching outfits and stuff. Like I cannot believe the stuff that they walk out of the house in, and that I I just can't believe that I let them do that when I
Right.
have like such, not, I'm not like obsessed with what I wear, but I take that very seriously. And with
Yeah.
them, it's like, especially my third kid, my 3-year-old, she just basically wears like shorts over pants. But I'm also like, it's creative expression, and then I
Yeah.
don't have to dress them. So it's just like
Right.
you're constantly you're figuring it out along the way, and you're finding what works. Like what battles do you want to fight? What things do you care about? But I've just turned it into like, this is just a family value, creative expression.
Right.
I got to do that growing up. What would you say to someone who's has the baby, like maybe they're pregnant, baby hasn't entered the picture yet, they're not in that like figuring it out stage? What would you say to them?
I would tell them that whatever their sort of definition of like what it means to be a support for your partner, like you need to really interrogate that and like be reflective enough to say that here are places where like I think I could be doing better. Here are places where I need to learn more because when that baby comes and kind of similar to what we touched on before, like, the birthing parent, in this case, my wife, Jess, it's so inherently unequal because of the burden placed on the mom in this case. It is inherent. You're going to be really tired. Your wife or the birthing parent is going to be exhausted. Like all of that is it's just like this glass box of emotion and being tired and exhausted, all the above. And so I think that like really asking yourself, how can I be additive? How am I adding value? How can I su- sort of support my wife or my partner in what they're doing so that I can be better. And then I also think on, as part of that too, it's like how do you need to take care of yourself so that you can be a good support? So like working out, eating right, like all those like things that you should be doing, like you have to not just prioritize them, but you also have to understand how they're going to fit into your schedule as what's going to be required in order to be the type of support that your partner is going to require.
That's so important, Rob. And I don't think we've touched on this piece specifically, but there's things that I've seen, again, in my own little echo chamber, about when a person has a child and they talk about like make sure you have your village. Well, some people don't have a village. And so there's kind of this advice of like, if you're going to have a child and you don't have this built in village for whatever reason, you need to start saving for your village. And that strikes me as so heartbreaking, that we know we need like when we say village, we need community. We need people around us who are supporting us and helping us, whether it's family, friends, neighbors, church, community, whatever it is.
I really do appreciate the chance to come on and chat with you. I mean, becoming a parent it's been great. Like I've enjoyed it. So I think that there's so many societal, cultural, all the is it's there's so many issues, but I think like making the decision to like bring a kid into this world, and it's being a parent is it's pretty cool. So I've
It is.
been very lucky, that's for sure.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for doing
Yeah.
this. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Okay. No, thank you.
Wasn't that refreshing? Right? Like, oh my gosh. Yes. So refreshing. Rob's fantastic. I wanted to make sure that I called out some of the facts that I had wrong about FMLA in the episode. So let's just get this straight. And I will link the website where I got this information from in the show notes. The earliest version of the FMLA was the Family Employment Security Act of 1984, and it called for up to 26 weeks per year of unpaid job protected leave to care for a new child, a child's illness, a spouse's disability, or the employee's own disability. Most activists actually wanted paid leave, but they worried that such a bill would not pass. And it wasn't until 1993 that the United States passed the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is FMLA, which grants certain categories of women and men up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave for the following reasons: birth and care of a newborn child, placement of a son or daughter, for adoption or foster care, care for an immediate family member with a serious health condition, the employee's own serious illness or injury. So that is what FMLA is, and I think I got some of those pieces wrong. Let's do some reflecting here. Are you about to have a baby? Or did you recently have a baby? Have you talked about what support you'll need from your partner, if there's a partner in the picture, or what you're doing for childcare, how that division of labor might look between the two of you? If you are not the birthing parent, have you, as Rob suggested, interrogated yourself? Have you taken an honest look in the mirror and asked yourself how you can be additive in the relationship? What can you do? Where can you step in and step up? If you're lucky enough to have a built-in village, how's that going for you? And if you don't have a village, whether it's natural, kind of built in, or outsourced, or some kind of combination, have you told yourself that you're doing the best you can with the resources that you have in this moment? Because if you haven't done that, you really should. It's important. We were not meant to do this alone. And if your kids are older, have you reflected back on what it was like when they were newborns? How equitable was it? How did that look? Do you have ideas or topics that we can discuss here? Do you want to be on the show, or do you have a recommendation of a man that I should invite on the show? Email me at beyondtheechochamberpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at beyondtheechochamberpod. Thank you for being here. Go have those hard conversations.